Now is Dr. Ellen Mahoney. I'm sorry, I keep doing this because my maiden name is actually spelt the same, and I would say Mahoney, but Ellen says Mahoney. So would you like to come up and join us? Dr. Mahoney is a local, well-renowned plastic surgeon. She is also a champion bodybuilder. She won the bikini part of the contest.
I didn't actually win.
You didn't?
No.
You placed or did something pretty amazing. Either way, just to be able to get that far is pretty impressive.
Yeah. But I was the oldest person, so I think I take the trophy.
That's pretty cool. You're awesome.
Thank you.
So Dr. Mahoney is going to give us a little rundown, and are we set up to do your aging matters? Okay, how about if we switch places?
Okay, great. Well, I think, first of all, I want to thank Trevor and Jill for inviting me to be here tonight. It's a real privilege to be a part of this kind of a group and to have this many people present. And I also want to thank Bianca Boutique, who had me buy this dress. And,
it looks beautiful.
I love it, and I think that you should stop by there and see if you can find some things for yourself as well. My topic tonight actually segues really well with what everybody else was talking about in terms of getting back into the dating world or revamping your relationship and trying to sort of do an assessment of yourself and figure out what your best assets are. And the area that's fascinating to me is beauty. And next slide. And really the question is what exactly is beauty? I mean, it's something that gets talked about ad infinitum, right? I mean, it's been talked about since 500 BC. Next slide. And, you know, sometimes we think about beauty and we say, well, we ask, is it really just skin deep? Is it in the eye of the beholder? Or is it something else entirely? And what I'd like to suggest to you tonight is that it is something else entirely. And I'm going to propose to you that there are 3 factors that influence beauty. And actually, everyone who's spoken tonight has kind of hit on these things, and it hasn't been as direct as what I'm going to suggest to you, but I'll go through this with you. If you look at line B there, B is a certain length. Let's say that it's 1. And if you look at line A is 1.618, which seems to be a very irrational number. But what matters about these 2 definitions is the proportion and the relationship between them. And whether you realize it or not, you're unconsciously drawn to this type of relationship in architecture, in art, in nature, and even the harmony in music. So it's not surprising that we look for these types of proportions in terms of facial dynamics. Next slide. Our face is divided into different segments. I think everybody knows this. If we were to compare the mid-face to the upper portion of the face, we'd be looking at this is 1, and this is 1.618. If you look at the mouth area, this would be 1, and the lower portion of the face is 1.618. Whether you believe it or not, we're all attracted to this, and we find this as an aesthetic, something that we really find lovely. If we look at the face on a horizontal view, what we prefer is when the fifths of the face are the same distance as the width of one eye. Whether we think about it or we don't think about it, it's just something that we're hardwired, next slide, to draw ourselves towards. And I know this because if we look at babies at 3 months of age and we say, when they start having facial recognition, what is it that draws them? If I took 3 of our faces and presented them to this baby, the baby would have the longest period of gaze with the ratio that's 1.618. It's just hardwired in our DNA. And if I were to take you and computerize you and look at you looking at me and try to figure out what is it that you're gazing at and what's your attention span at, the first thing that you're looking at is my midface. The next thing you're looking at is the center of my face, and then you move to the periphery. It just happens to be that way. Next slide. So the other way of looking at this in a more graphic sense, if we look at this woman and we say, we're sort of all in agreement, and we say she's a very attractive woman. But if I apply to her the relationships of the golden ratio, she looks like this. And what's interesting about this, that regardless of age, regardless of sex, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of culture, universally, we're all drawn to this proportion. Next slide. So what happens with aging? What is it that happens to us as women that we really get annoyed about? I don't think it's the process of aging. I don't think it's the fact that you're getting older or you're getting older or you're getting older. That's not what bothers us. What bothers us is that we lose the smoothness of the skin. These concentric circles around the brow hair, around the orbit bone, around the lash line, the soft transitions between the lower lid and the cheek and the face, dramatically shift with aging. The whole proportion changes dramatically so that we develop a much more linear look, a lot of obliquity, a squared off face, and a lot of harshness. So really what the problem is, next slide, is that we lose our femininity. These are the true characteristics of the feminine face, and what we end up taking on, regrettably, is the look of the Marlboro Man.
This is bad.
And to
We do not
all
want to
of the
look like the
women
Marlboro
here-
Man.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to say is that to the matchmakers here, what I'm looking for, and I want to be first on your list, I'm looking for the Marlboro Man very specifically. But for all of us here as women, we don't want to look like the Marlboro Man.
I don't
It's just
wanna
not
look
going
like
to
the
cut
Marlboro
it
Man.
for us, right, Trevor? Would you want to look like the
No,
Marlboro Man?
absolutely
Jill,
not.
would you want to look? No, I don't think so. Next slide. So the second factor that influences beauty in terms of your beauty quotient is health. And health is a big topic, and I could spend an endless amount of time educating you about this. But the reality is that what's most important about health is understanding how it affects the quality of your life. This is you at 35. You have rich, dense muscles. They're tightly packed. There's no air between them. They're all robust. This is you at 50. You've lost 30% of your lean muscle mass. These fibers don't look so great anymore. There's a lot of space between them.
I hope I look better than that.
I know. Why did I get into bodybuilding? This is the reason,
Well,
right?
It's working for you.
Look at this, bone density, right? At 35, spongy, great hardwire. It's just wonderful. It supports us beautifully. At 80, we've lost 50%. We're really in serious trouble. Next slide. Hormones. Does anybody in this room not understand the hormone problem? Anybody? Raise your hand. Just as I thought. This is an issue, right? So there's many things we can do on our own to support our hormones, and I can talk to you about that at a later date. You and I need to chat. But
Next event.
from a metabolism standpoint, outside of hormones, there's a big shift as well. As young women, we don't store fat in our central body. As we age, we do. We get this overall thickening. We lose our waistlines. We hate it. Next slide. So from a quality of life standpoint, and this is really the takeaway point, at 35, your health is maximized, right? Here you are, 35, maximally healthy. From 35 forward, you're probably all going to live to be about 80. It's a precipitous decline. If you're willing to optimize a few things in your life, change your lifestyle, work on your diet, embrace some type of exercise, particularly weightlifting, you can extend this quality of life infinitely. You can live a great life. Ultimately, it's going to end, but
So
at least you'll have lived
exercise
it wonderfully.
is really important
Right?
as we age.
Very
Absolutely.
important. Next
Yeah.
slide. The third factor, and Kristen hit on it very well with her images, and a couple of the other ladies did as well. The other factor that's integral to your beauty assessment is this thing what I call the it factor. It's those subtle nuances, it's those characteristics that make you unique, it's those irksome things, those quirky things about that you may see as a shortcoming, and I'm telling you they're not shortcomings, not in the least. When I look at this image, back one, I don't really see these prostheses. What I see is a stunning woman who's extremely confident. She owns what's hers and she rolls with it. If I look at this woman, there's some people in this room might say,
She's
oh, she's a
beautiful."
little chubby, right? I don't think she's
no.
chubby. I think she's incredibly sexy and she's loving herself. Next slide.
This is getting your mojo back. As
Vitiligo.
Sari was talking about, right?
Vitiligo, right? I mean, there's women who would be walking around in long sleeve shirts, turtlenecks, and they'd be wearing tons of cover-up makeup. This girl right here, she's a top runway model right now, and you know why? Because she's confident in who she is. This lady, I'm probably sure you've guessed, she's had a mastectomy. This happens to people all the time. She owns it. She's incorporated it and made that an asset of who she is. Next slide. And what about aging? A topic very
Hello?
close to my heart. I would love to be like Carmen Del Furis over time. She's
gorgeous.
probably in her 80s. She's got a little bit lean muscle mass. Her skin isn't as tight as it was, but God,
looks
she's
so
rocking
beautiful.
it. And one of my favorites is Ernestine Shepherd. She's the oldest bodybuilder in
She's
America.
amazing.
She's 74 years old. Does she look old? No. She doesn't
amazing.
look old because that it factor is the biggest player in terms of your beauty quotient. Next slide. So as women, I think you have the opportunity to define yourself. And as you enter midlife, you shouldn't be thinking about it as a crisis. You should be thinking about it as a time of optimal creation, right?
I like that.
I mean, it's
Find
the one
your
time.
essence and
Yeah, it's
grow
the
it.
essence of who you are. It's the next chance that you have to really create yourself and put yourself out there in the universe. Don't be afraid of who you are. And if you have any doubts about it, call me because I can help you with your beauty quotient. So in closing, your beauty quotient is really a combination of harmony between proportion, between health and the quality of your life, and between this it factor. And it doesn't mean, hi Kathy, that these things have to be in equal proportion. They rarely are. They're usually unequal, but at the end of the day, they all equal 3. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time, rapid, but I wanted to stay within the timeline. Please pick up our gift cards. We have a little gift for all of you. Next slide. And please join me on June 3rd, where we're going to be talking about how to make this happen with mind and body mastery through the decades. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mahoney. That was so
Thank
We have
you,
a few
Trevor.
questions for you
Awesome.
too that we got
Yeah.
from people in our audience.
So embracing your
I'd like,
uniqueness.
could you please ask Dr. Ellen Mahoney? One question I got was from somebody who's recently divorced, wants to start doing some things, perhaps with a doctor such as yourself, and really doesn't know where to start. She has, her budget's not huge. She's nervous.
Right.
What do you advise people
Well,
at that point?
this is what we see all the time. And I think what's important about somebody who's thinking about plastic surgery and doesn't have a lot of information is they should feel comfortable with where they're going and know that if they come into this office anyway, they're going to get a very simple consultation. It's probably going to be about an hour. But one of the things that's important is we want to know your budget. I mean, I don't think you have to jump into everything at one time. I think that it's my job to speak with you and get to know you and find out what your priorities are. And it's also my job to be able to present to you options and explain to you what the good and bad of those options are. And obviously, budget is a big issue. So
Yes.
in my office, I'm not going to say to you, all right, you need 4 syringes of Juvederm, you need 22 injections of Botox, because that's completely unreasonable. Most people who haven't done anything, in my opinion, are best situated by trying something like one small thing. Like maybe you do a little Botox in between your brows.
And how much does that cost, for example? Just
Well,
that?
you know what? It depends on the budget, basically. I mean, if somebody has a very limited budget, then my feeling is that we're going to work within that budget and say that although 5 injections here might be ideal, if your budget is less than that number, then go with 2.
So
You're going to
really
see an
learn
improvement.
to maximize. You
Yeah,
can say,
maximize. Start with something, and you can
Little
always
bit,
add
and-
on. Don't feel that you have to do everything at one time. That's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
And the nice part is there are lots of options out there today, and you don't necessarily have to have surgery. There's fillers and Botox,
Truly.
there's all sorts of things to do. So.
I do, agreed. And for women in their 30s and 40s, I think that the injectables are really the best way to go. I think that, as an example, as I was speaking about proportion, we all in this room, we're not walking around with proportions of 1.618, but I think we would all agree that we understand the aesthetic of it. Part of what happens with aging, as we saw with Brigitte Bardot, is that proportion changes. But it's very easy with fillers, as an example, to enhance that mid-face area. And I feel that what's valuable about fillers is really being able to guide somebody and understanding what they can and can't do. And as an example, I don't personally think it's a great idea to load up the lower face and try to correct these marionette lines and all that stuff. It doesn't really work well there. But I think your money is spent well in filling out the mid-face and, again, creating that proportion that aesthetically is attractive on pretty much everybody.
Getting those cheekbones going, right?
Those cheekbones going. I mean, you can't go wrong with the cheekbones.
We like that. Yeah.
I have another question. I've
Sure.
heard that so many more men are going to plastic surgeons for fillers and plastic surgery, and I'd like to know if you found that in your practice, and I also want to know if you ever see couples come in together.
dynamic.
That would be
Yes. Well, I can answer both of those questions. So probably about 20% of my practice is men. And the men do come in for fillers and injectables, Botox, things like that, for the same reasons that women do. The other thing that men are very interested in is eyelid surgery. They're
Right.
interested in contouring of the neck. And they also are interested in liposuction of the flank area, which is, all
I'm
of us,
interested
men
in
and women, have that
liposuction.
issue.
We all get that one.
So, yes. I mean,
So
it's
you can
it's
get a
important.
group discount.
Yeah. So when couples come in to that
Yes.
point, and I do see couples, oftentimes the woman will come in first and then the husband or partner follows second. We do offer a discount because it just makes sense.
Family discount.
A family discount. Okay, yeah, definitely makes sense.
So at your table, everybody, if you haven't stopped at Dr. Mahoney's table, it's right by the check-in table. She has lots of goodies, some giveaways, and I think it's 20% off
Yes,
of your first injectable.
we have a certificate for everybody who's
could be
attended
substantial.
today. A 20% savings on injectables, and we do have
That's
some
good.
samples of skincare products and some other information for you as well. So be sure to pick that up.
They're right in the front.
Thank you.
It's really terrific. She's